A single breath, and suddenly you're here, dropped into existence in 1947. Born to what looks like the perfect American family. Your father, Victor, seems decent enough, your mother, Virginia, dotes on you, and your sister, Alice, becomes your first companion in this strange new world. But there's something different about you. Something that makes the adults whisper behind closed doors. The teachers call you broken, the doctors say you're troubled, and your parents just hope that maybe, with enough love and patience, you'll turn out normal. Spoiler alert, you absolutely will not.
You're Henry Creel, and from the moment you take your first steps, life has other plans for you. Dark, twisted plans that will eventually transform you into one of the most terrifying monsters in supernatural history. This isn't your typical coming-of-age story where the weird kid finds his place and everything works out fine. This is the story of how being born different in 1940s America sets you on a path toward becoming something so horrifying that an entire town will spend decades trying to survive you. By the time you're 12 years old, your family decides a change of scenery might do you some good. So off you go to a little town called Hawkins, Indiana, where the suburbs are supposed to cure whatever is wrong with you. Your parents buy this gorgeous house with their inheritance money, and Alice thinks it's like something out of a fairy tale. But you can already sense that moving here won't fix anything. If anything, it's about to make everything so much worse. The house itself becomes your first real prison. Not because anyone locks you in, but because this is where you discover just how different you really are. While other kids your age are playing outside and making friends, you find yourself drawn to the darker corners of your new home. The bathroom vents become your hunting ground, where you discover a colony of black widow spiders, and suddenly you've found the first living creatures that actually make sense to you. These spiders become your obsession, your teachers, your only friends.
You spend hours watching them, studying their movements, collecting them in jars that you hide away in the attic. Most people would be terrified of these deadly creatures, but you see something beautiful in their solitary nature. They don't need anyone else. They're perfectly designed predators who eliminate the weak and keep everything balanced. They're everything you wish you could be. That's when you notice the grandfather clock in your house, this massive wooden timepiece that seems to watch you just as intently as you watch your spiders. One afternoon, while staring at those brass hands, something incredible happens. The clock hands start moving, not because it's time for them to move, but because you're making them move. With nothing but your thoughts, you're bending reality to your will. This discovery opens up a whole new world of possibilities, and none of them are good. You realize you can do so much more than move clock hands. You can slip inside people's minds like a thief in the night, rummaging through their thoughts and memories. You can make them see things that aren't there, force them to relive their worst moments, turn their own minds against them. It's like having a master key to every locked door in someone's head. Your family becomes your first test subjects, though they have no idea what's happening to them. Your father, Victor, starts having these horrific nightmares about his time in World War II, reliving the moment he accidentally killed an innocent family.
Your mother, Virginia, finds herself paralyzed with terror as spiders seem to pour out of every drain in the house. Even sweet Alice, who never did anything wrong to anyone, becomes a victim of your twisted experiments. But here's the thing about having these kinds of powers as a kid. You don't really understand the weight of what you're doing. To you, it's just fascinating to see what makes people tick, to poke at their deepest fears and watch them squirm. You justify it by telling yourself that you're just showing them who they really are, holding up a mirror to their true selves. Your father's guilt over killing innocents in the war, your mother's desperate need to appear perfect, these aren't things you created, just things you're revealing. The problem is, your family doesn't see it that way. They just know that their lives have become a living nightmare since moving to this house. Victor thinks they're being haunted by some kind of demon. Virginia suspects the truth is much closer to home, and that terrifies her even more than any ghost would.
Your mother starts researching, looking for answers, looking for help. That's how she finds Dr. Martin Brenner, a man who claims he can study children like you, understand what makes you different, maybe even fix you. When you discover their plan to send you away, something inside you snaps completely. The night you find out about their betrayal becomes the night that changes everything. You've been playing with your powers for months, but tonight you're not playing anymore. Tonight you're going to show your family exactly what you're capable of when they push you too far. You start with the radio, using your abilities to make it scan through stations until it lands on pure static. The sound fills the house like white noise, but it's really the soundtrack to what's about to become a massacre. Your mother goes first, lifted into the air by invisible hands as you squeeze her brain until blood pours from her eyes and her bones snap like twigs. She crashes down onto the dining room table like a broken doll.
Your father, completely unaware that his own son is the monster he's been fearing, grabs you and Alice and tries to run for the door. But you're not done yet. You entrap him in his own mind, forcing him to relive that burning baby in France over and over again, while you turn your attention to Alice. Your innocent sister, who never did anything but love you, becomes your second victim as you destroy her in exactly the same way you destroyed your mother. The effort of killing two people in such a short time pushes your young body beyond its limits. You collapse into a coma, which is probably the only thing that saves your father's life. When the police find Victor surrounded by the bodies of his wife and daughter, covered in their blood and completely out of his mind, they assume he's the killer. He gets shipped off to a mental institution, and you get shipped off to become Dr. Brenner's newest test subject. You wake up in a sterile laboratory, where a man insists you call him Papa, even though he's about as far from a father figure as you could imagine.
Brenner has been waiting for someone like you, someone with abilities that could potentially be weaponized for the government. The Cold War is heating up, and the United States needs every advantage it can get against the Soviet Union. Psychic children who can kill with their minds? That's exactly the kind of advantage they've been looking for. But Brenner quickly realizes that you're too dangerous to control through normal means. You're not like the other children he'll eventually create through his twisted experiments. You're older, smarter, and far more powerful than he anticipated. After you demonstrate just how little his authority means to you by overpowering him with your abilities, he resorts to extreme measures. The Soteria becomes your new prison, a tiny device implanted in your neck that tracks your every movement and, more importantly, blocks your access to your own powers. It's like having a constant migraine that gets worse every time you try to use your abilities.
The device monitors your brain activity and causes excruciating pain whenever you attempt to access the memories that fuel your telekinesis. For the next 24 years, you're trapped in this laboratory, reduced to working as an orderly while Brenner creates a whole new generation of psychic children. He numbers them like lab rats, and since you were the first, you get the number 001 tattooed on your wrist like some kind of twisted badge of honor. You watch as dozens of kids get put through the same kinds of experiments that you endured, except they're younger, more malleable, easier to control. The worst part isn't the physical captivity. It's watching Brenner succeed where your own parents failed. These children actually love him. They call him Papa with genuine affection, not knowing that he's the architect of their imprisonment. They follow his rules, complete his tests, and never question why they can't leave or see their real families. They're everything you refuse to be: obedient, compliant, perfectly controlled. But you're patient.
You spend those decades watching, learning, planning. You discover every secret passage in the laboratory, every weakness in their security, every flaw in Brenner's system. You figure out how to move through the facility undetected, how to avoid the cameras, how to get close to the other subjects without raising suspicion. And then you meet her, a little girl with the number 011 tattooed on her wrist, who doesn't fit in with the other children. She's picked on, isolated, struggling with her powers in ways that remind you of your own childhood. She becomes your ticket to freedom, though she has no idea what you're really planning. You see yourself in her isolation, her anger, her confusion about why the world seems to reject her. But unlike you, she still has innocence, still believes that people can be good, still thinks that Papa might actually care about her well-being.
You recognize this as both her greatest weakness and her greatest strength, and you know exactly how to exploit both. The manipulation starts small. Secret conversations away from the cameras, little pieces of information about Papa's lies,
Gentle suggestions about how she might access more of her power. You position yourself as her only friend in this place, the only person who really understands what she's going through. What she doesn't know is that befriending her isn't about companionship, it's about escape. After more than 22 years of captivity, you finally found someone powerful enough to remove the device that's kept you trapped. And once that soteria comes out, everyone in Hawkins' lab is going to discover exactly why Dr. Brenner was so afraid of you in the first place. You convince Eleven to help you by playing on her desperation and her need for a friend who understands her pain. You tell her about the device in your neck, show her how Papa has been lying to all of them, plant seeds of doubt about everything she's been taught to believe. When she finally uses her powers to remove the soteria, it's like taking off a straitjacket that's been crushing your soul for 24 years. The moment that chip comes out, you feel your abilities flood back into your body like water rushing through a broken dam.
Every suppressed memory, every ounce of rage you've been forced to swallow, every moment of humiliation at Brenner's hands comes roaring back with interest. The guards who used to shock you at tasers until you couldn't stand, they're the first to go, their necks snapping with a casual flick of your wrist. You tell Eleven to hide while you handle the escape, but hiding isn't what you have in mind at all. This isn't about getting out anymore. This is about payback. 24 years of being treated like a lab rat, of watching Brenner create his perfect little soldiers, of being forced to pretend you're just another orderly when you should be feared and respected. Every single person in this facility is going to pay for what they've done to you. The massacre that follows isn't quick or merciful. You take your time with each victim, savoring the fear in their eyes as they realize what's happening. The children who looked down on you, who followed Papa's rules so perfectly while you rotted in captivity, you lift them into the air and crush them like insects.
The scientists who studied you like you were some kind of specimen, their screams echo through the halls as you turn their own research against them. You save the most brutal deaths for the guards, the ones who carried out Brenner's orders without question. They get to experience every ounce of pain they ever inflicted on you, multiplied by 24 years of accumulated hatred. Their bodies twist and break in ways that shouldn't be possible, and you drink in every second of their agony. When Eleven finally emerges from her hiding spot, you expect her to understand. You expect her to see the justice in what you've done, to recognize that these people deserved exactly what they got. Instead, she looks at you with horror, like you're some kind of monster instead of her liberator. That's when you realize she's been contaminated by their lies, poisoned by Papa's manipulation just like all the others. But unlike the others, she's powerful enough to be useful.
You try to explain your vision for the future, how the two of you could reshape this broken world into something better. No more fake families pretending to be perfect. No more societies built on lies and hypocrisy. Just truth, raw and unfiltered, with the weak eliminated and the strong ruling as they should. She rejects you completely. And that's when you understand that she's just like everyone else. Another disappointment, another person who chooses comfortable lies over harsh reality. But she's also dangerous. More dangerous than you anticipated. When she focuses on some pathetic, happy memory, instead of channeling her anger like you taught her, her power becomes something you didn't expect. The force she hits you with doesn't just hurt, it tears reality itself apart. You feel yourself being ripped away from everything you've ever known, pulled through a hole in the universe into someplace else entirely. The last thing you see of the real world is Eleven's face, twisted with effort and determination before everything goes black. You wake up in hell, or something close enough that the difference doesn't matter. The air itself burns your skin like acid rain. Lightning constantly tears through the sky, and everything is wrong. Wrong colors, wrong sounds, wrong physics. This place operates by different rules, and those rules are actively trying to kill you. The creatures here are unlike anything from your world, all teeth and claws and hunger. Under normal circumstances, they'd tear you apart in seconds. But you're not normal, and you're definitely not helpless. Your powers work differently here, stronger somehow, more connected to the fabric of this twisted dimension. You reach out with your mind and find something incredible. Everything here is connected. Every creature, every plant, every particle of this nightmare realm shares a collective consciousness. It's like a vast network of living organisms, all plugged into the same system. And systems, you've learned, can be hacked. The process isn't instant or easy. You have to fight for dominance over creatures that have existed here for eons, beings that were apex predators long before you arrived. But you have something they don't: intelligence, strategy, and a bottomless well of rage that's been building for decades. One by one, you assert control over the lesser creatures. From there, you work your way up the food chain, each victory making you stronger, more connected to the hive mind that runs this place. The organisms here don't just communicate telepathically, they share experiences, memories, even pain. When you hurt one, they all feel it. When you control one, you can influence them all. The storm clouds above become your greatest prize. These aren't just weather patterns, they're living entities, ancient and powerful, that serve as the brain of this entire dimension. When you finally manage to overwhelm their consciousness and bend them to your will, you reshape them into something familiar. The form you choose isn't random. It's the same pattern you drew obsessively as a child, the shape that fascinated you in those black widow spiders.
Now you have an army, a kingdom, and unlimited time to plan your revenge. This dimension becomes your workshop, your laboratory, your throne room. You can see everything that happens here, control everything that moves, reshape reality according to your whims. It's the kind of power you always dreamed of having. And all it cost you was your humanity. The physical changes come gradually. The lightning that constantly tears through this realm doesn't just scar your skin, it transforms you at a cellular level. Your left hand becomes a massive claw, perfect for crushing the life out of anyone who opposes you. Your face warps and twists until you barely look human anymore. Your body becomes something between a corpse and a god, held together by will and spite more than biology. You embrace every change, every deformity, every sign that you're becoming something beyond human limitations.
The boy named Henry Creel is dead, burned away by years of torment and rejection. What remains is something older, angrier, and infinitely more dangerous. The kids back in Hawkins will eventually give you a name pulled from their little fantasy games, Vecna, after some undead wizard from their rule books. But names don't matter anymore. What matters is that you're no longer trapped, no longer weak, no longer at anyone's mercy. You've become exactly what this world made you, a monster with the power to reshape reality itself. And someday, when the barriers between dimensions weaken enough, you're gonna return to show everyone exactly what they created when they decided to treat you like a broken thing that needed fixing. The irony isn't lost on you. They wanted to cure you of being different, to make you normal, to force you into their neat little boxes of acceptable behavior. Instead, they turned you into their worst nightmare, a god of vengeance with unlimited power and absolutely nothing left to lose.
Every person who ever called you broken, every doctor who said you needed fixing, every family member who looked at you with disappointment instead of love, contributed to creating this monster. From your throne in this twisted realm, surrounded by creatures that exist only to serve your will, you can finally admit the truth. Being born as Henry Creel was never the problem.
being born into a world that couldn't accept what you were, that tried to change you instead of understanding you, that ultimately forced you to become something truly monstrous. That world is about to learn the hardest lesson of all. Sometimes the thing you're trying to cure ends up being the thing that destroys you. Your first taste of real freedom comes with a price tag nobody warned you about. Complete isolation from everything you once knew. Sure, you've got an entire dimension under your control now, but ruling over a kingdom of nightmares gets old faster than you'd expect. The creatures here don't exactly make for stimulating conversation, and the constant screaming winds aren't much of a soundtrack for your grand plans of revenge. But isolation has its benefits.
With nothing but time on your hands and an entire realm to experiment with, you start figuring out the rules of this twisted place. Every vine, every shadow, every spark of lightning responds to your will like extensions of your own nervous system. It's intoxicating in a way that your old powers never were. Back then, you had to focus, concentrate, really work to move that grandfather clock or crush someone's mind. Here, reality bends around you like it's apologizing for existing. The real breakthrough comes when you realize that this dimension isn't just some random hellscape you got banished to. It's actually connected to your old world. The barriers between the two places are thin, fragile, like tissue paper separating two rooms. And tissue paper, as you discover, can be torn pretty easily when you know exactly where to apply pressure. Your first glimpse back into the normal world comes courtesy of that little brat who sent you here in the first place. 11, still playing the role of Papa's perfect weapon, gets sent on a mission to explore your domain through some kind of mental projection.
She's floating in one of those sensory deprivation tanks, probably thinking she's so clever, so powerful, so untouchable. What she doesn't realize is that she's basically knocked on your front door and asked to come in for tea. The moment her consciousness enters your realm, you can sense her presence like a bright light in the darkness. She's not looking for you specifically, she's hunting for some other creature, some mindless beast that escaped into her world. But her very presence here gives you exactly what you've been waiting for, a bridge back home. The connection works both ways, and through her you can finally see what's been happening in Hawkins since your dramatic exit. The town looks different now, more afraid, more aware that something dangerous lurks just beneath the surface of their perfect little suburban paradise. People are starting to disappear, strange things are happening, and nobody quite knows what to make of it all. But the best part is watching how 11 has grown. She's older now, more powerful, but still clinging to those same pathetic ideals that made her reject your perfectly reasonable offer of partnership. She's got friends now, people who depend on her, people she cares about, people who would make excellent leverage when the time comes for your inevitable reunion. The creature she's tracking, one of your new subjects from this dimension, gives you a brilliant idea. Why wait for the barriers to weaken naturally when you can help the process along? Every time one of your monsters crosses into the normal world, it tears a little hole in reality. Every person it kills, every bit of chaos it causes, every moment of terror it creates weakens the boundary between dimensions just a little bit more. So you start sending them through in carefully orchestrated waves. Not enough to completely destroy everything right away. That would be wasteful and, frankly, not nearly as satisfying as a slow, methodical campaign of terror.
Instead, you send just enough creatures to keep everyone on edge, to make them understand that their safe little world isn't so safe anymore. The first major breach comes when your Demogorgon manages to snatch a couple of kids right out of their normal lives. One dies quickly, no great loss there, but the other one survives long enough to become something special. You plant a piece of yourself inside him, a little biological transmitter that lets you see through his eyes, hear through his ears, experience his world through his senses. Will Byers becomes your first real spy in the normal world, though he has no idea what's happening to him. Through his infected perspective, you watch his friends scramble to save him, Watch 11 struggle with her powers. Watch the adults fumble around trying to understand forces completely beyond their comprehension. It's better than any television show ever made. But the connection only works when there's an active gate between your dimension and theirs. The moment 11 seals that first portal, you lose your window into their world, and poor little Will gets cut off from your influence.
It's frustrating, but not entirely unexpected. You always knew she'd try to slam the door shut once she realized what was happening. The next year brings a delicious opportunity when some Soviet agents decide to drill their own hole into your domain. These idiots think they can harness the creatures here as weapons against the United States, completely unaware that they're essentially offering you a direct invitation to wreak havoc. You're not particularly interested in Cold War politics, but you're definitely interested in chaos. This time, instead of sending mindless beasts through the portal, you try something more elegant. You take control of that Hargrove boy, Billy, the angry one with all that barely contained rage simmering just beneath his perfect exterior. He reminds you a bit of yourself at that age, all that fury with nowhere productive to channel it. Through Billy, you start building a proper army. Not monsters this time, but people. Normal, everyday residents of Hawkins who get pulled into your web one by one.
Each person you convert becomes a recruiting tool for the next, and before long, you've got dozens of unwilling servants all working toward the same goal, opening your dimension wide enough for you to step through personally. The process of flipping people inside out and reforming them into a single massive creature is deeply satisfying in ways you didn't expect. It's like being an artist, but instead of painting canvas, you're working with flesh and bone and terror. The final form you create, this writhing, spider-like mass of human remains, becomes your masterpiece, your statement to the world about what you think of their precious humanity. The battle at Starcourt Mall almost goes perfectly. Your meat creature nearly manages to absorb 11's power, which would have made you unstoppable. But once again, she slips through your fingers at the last second, saved by the same kind of friendship and love that you've always found so nauseating.
Still, you manage to leave her with a parting gift, another piece of yourself, planted deep in her mind where it can grow and spread. When they close the portal this time, cutting off your creature from your direct control, you're not as frustrated as you were before. Because now, you've got something better than a window into their world. You've got a piece of yourself living inside their most powerful defender. That little implant is going to come in very handy for what you're planning next. The years pass differently here than they do in the normal world. Time moves like thick syrup, each moment stretching out until you can examine every detail, plan every contingency, perfect every aspect of your eventual return. You use this extended timeline to study your enemies, learning their weaknesses, mapping their relationships, figuring out exactly which pressure points will cause the most damage when you finally make your move. 11's connection to you works both ways, though she doesn't seem to realize it yet. While you planted something in her mind, the process also gave you access to some of her abilities. Her talent for astral projection, for finding people across vast distances using nothing but mental energy, becomes yours to command.
It's like inheriting the perfect hunting tool. With this new skill, you can reach out across dimensions and peer into the minds of Hawkins residents, searching for the perfect victims. Not random targets this time. You want people who are suffering, people who carry guilt and shame and regret like open wounds, people who will understand, on some level, that they deserve what's about to happen to them. The grandfather clock from your childhood home becomes your calling card, your signature that lets 11 know exactly who's behind the new wave of terror. Every victim sees it before they die. Here's those 4 chimes that represent the 4 gates you need to tear Hawkins apart completely. It's poetic justice, using the same clock where you first discovered your powers to announce your return. Chrissy Cunningham becomes your opening move. A cheerleader struggling with body image issues and an abusive mother. She's perfect, young, guilty, convinced that she deserves every cruel word that gets thrown at her. When you pull her into your mental realm and show her twisted versions of her worst fears,
She breaks so beautifully that you almost feel sorry for her.
Almost. Her death opens the first gate, just as you planned. More importantly, it sets up that Munson boy to take the blame, the same way your father got framed for your family's murders all those years ago. History doesn't repeat, but it certainly rhymes, and watching the town turn against an innocent person brings back some truly fond memories. Fred Benson follows the same pattern. Guilt over a car accident, survivor's shame eating him alive from the inside. His death opens the second gate and confirms that your plan is working perfectly. 2 down, 2 to go, and then Hawkins will finally get what it's had coming for decades. But then that Mayfield girl has to go and complicate things by actually fighting back.
Max manages to escape your mental trap using music, of all things. Some ridiculous pop song that apparently means more to her than her own life. It's infuriating watching your perfect kill get ruined by the power of friendship and good vibes. But it also teaches you something important about your enemies. They're stronger when they're together. 11 was weak and easily manipulated when she was isolated in Brenner's lab, but surrounded by friends who actually care about her, she becomes something much more dangerous. The same principle applies to all of them. Separately, they're just frightened children, but together they represent a real threat to your plans. So you adjust your strategy. Instead of just picking off victims one by one, you start targeting their support systems, their relationships, their reasons for fighting back. You show Nancy Wheeler visions of Hawkins being consumed by your dimension, not because you want to scare her, but because you want her to carry that fear back to the others.
Fear spreads faster than fire, and frightened people make stupid decisions. Patrick McKinney becomes your third victim, his death opening the third gate right in front of his terrified teammates. The psychological impact is just as important as the dimensional breach. Now, everyone in town knows that nowhere is safe, that you can reach them anywhere, anytime, without warning. With 3 gates open, you're close enough to the normal world to establish a proper base of operations. The upside-down version of your childhood home becomes your throne room, your command center, your sanctuary. The vines that run through everything here connect you to every corner of both dimensions, giving you eyes and ears everywhere you need them. The 4th gate requires something special. Not just any victim will do for the final phase of your plan. You need someone connected to 11, someone whose death will hurt her personally, while also completing the ritual that will tear Hawkins apart forever.
Max Mayfield, the girl who escaped you once before, becomes the perfect candidate for this honor. But taking her down requires getting through 11 first, and she's grown so much stronger since your last encounter. The final battle becomes a 3-front war, your mind battling theirs in the mental realm, your physical body fighting their allies in the upside down, and your creatures engaging their friends in Russia. It's chaos on a scale you've never attempted before, and for the first time in years, you actually feel something resembling excitement. When Max finally dies and the 4th gate tears open, splitting Hawkins down the middle like a rotten fruit, you allow yourself a moment of pure satisfaction. Decades of planning, years of patience, countless setbacks and failures, and finally you've achieved what you set out to do. The town that rejected you, the world that tried to fix you, the society that called you broken, they're all about to discover what broken really looks like. But even in your moment of triumph, there's something nagging at you, some small detail that doesn't quite fit the pattern.
The destruction isn't complete yet, and you can sense that your enemies are still moving, still plotting, still refusing to accept their defeat. The story isn't over yet, not by a long shot, and something tells you that the final chapter is going to be the bloodiest one of all. The worst part about finally getting your revenge isn't the destruction itself. It's realizing that revenge never quite tastes as sweet as you imagined it would. Sure, watching Hawkins split down the middle like a cracked egg brings a certain satisfaction, but there's this hollow feeling underneath it all, like biting into an apple only to find it rotten at the core. You hover in your makeshift throne room, suspended by the very vines that connect you to every corner of this nightmare realm, and survey your handiwork. The fault line cuts through the town exactly as you planned, creating a massive gateway between dimensions. Buildings collapse into the chasm, streets buckle and tear, and the terrified screams of residents echo up from the chaos below. It should feel like victory, but instead it feels like the end of a very long, very exhausting game.
Part of the problem is that your enemies refuse to stay dead. That Mayfield girl, whose death was supposed to be the final piece of your puzzle, gets yanked back from the brink by Eleven's desperate intervention. 1 minute she's gone, her heart stopped, her purpose served, and the next minute she's breathing again, clinging to life in some hospital bed while her friends celebrate their small victory. It's infuriating, watching them snatch hope from the jaws of despair like that. You spent decades perfecting the art of crushing people's spirits, and here they are, refusing to acknowledge when they're beaten. They patch each other up, lean on each other for support, find strength in their connections that makes them far more resilient than any individual should be. The physical damage to your body from their three-pronged assault is extensive, but not permanent. Burns heal, cuts close, bones mend, especially when you've got an entire dimension's worth of dark energy flowing through your system. But there's something different about these injuries, something that suggests your enemies have learned a few new tricks since your last encounter.
Nancy Wheeler's shotgun blast took a chunk out of your shoulder that's been slow to regenerate. Steve Harrington's Molotov cocktails left scars that seemed to pulse with their own heat. Even that Buckley girl managed to land a few hits that stung more than they should have. These aren't the frightened children you remember from years past. They've grown up, hardened, learned how to fight back effectively. More troubling is the way your connection to the hive mind keeps flickering, like a radio picking up interference. Every time someone back in Russia torches one of your creatures with a flamethrower, every time a vine gets severed or a monster gets killed, you feel it as phantom pain racing through your nervous system. The collective consciousness that once felt like unlimited power now feels like a liability, a weakness your enemies can exploit. You try to focus on the positives. The barriers between dimensions are weaker now than they've ever been. Your influence can seep through the cracks, corrupting the normal world in subtle ways that most people won't even notice until it's too late. Plants start growing wrong. Animals behave strangely. The very air takes on a quality that makes sensitive people nervous without knowing why. But even these small victories feel hollow when measured against the larger picture. Hawkins is wounded but not destroyed. Your enemies are scattered but not defeated. 11 is traumatized but not broken. For someone who spent so many years planning the perfect revenge, the results are disappointingly incomplete. The real frustration comes from watching how they respond to your attack.
Instead of falling apart like you expected, the survivors pulled together even tighter. They set up shelters for the displaced, organize rescue missions for the trapped, create support networks for the traumatized. It's exactly the kind of community cooperation that you've always found nauseating, but you can't deny its effectiveness. 11, despite everything you've put her through, remains the most aggravating piece of the puzzle. She should be consumed with guilt over her role in creating you, paralyzed by the knowledge that every person you've killed is partly her responsibility. Instead, she channels that guilt into determination, using it as fuel to become even more powerful, even more committed to stopping you. The other children from Brenner's program start trickling back into the picture, drawn by news reports about Hawkins and their own mysterious connections to the chaos. Some of them remember you from the old days. Remember the massacre at the lab. Remember the fear in your eyes when 11 banished you. They're older now.
Their power's fully developed, and they're not inclined to give you the benefit of the doubt.
2 becomes particularly troublesome, showing up with abilities that complement 11s in ways that make them exponentially more dangerous together. 3 and 5 aren't far behind, and suddenly you're facing the prospect of multiple psychic opponents working in concert against you. It's the kind of coordinated resistance you never had to deal with back when you were just Henry Creel, the weirdo with anger issues. Your attempts to expand beyond Hawkins meet with mixed results. The corruption spreads slowly through the surrounding areas, but it also attracts attention from government agencies that are far better equipped to deal with supernatural threats than they were in the old days. Military units with specialized training, scientists with decades of research into dimensional phenomena, weapons designed specifically to hurt creatures like you. The world has changed while you were trapped in the Upside Down, and not necessarily in ways that favor your particular brand of chaos. People are more connected now, information travels faster, and there are entire networks of researchers studying phenomena that used to be dismissed as impossible. Your reign of terror becomes a global news story within hours, complete with expert analysis and speculation about your origins and motivation. Some of the speculation hits uncomfortably close to home. Investigative journalists dig into the old Creel family murders, interviewing surviving witnesses, examining police reports, building a narrative that paints you less as an unstoppable force of nature and more as a damaged child who never learned how to process trauma properly. It's reductive and insulting, but it's also not entirely wrong, and that bothers you more than you care to admit. The psychological warfare starts cutting both ways. Where you once had a monopoly on entering people's minds and showing them their worst fears, now you're dealing with opponents who understand your methods and can fight back using similar techniques. 11 learns to shield not just her own thoughts, but the thoughts of others, creating mental safe spaces that you can't penetrate. Sleep becomes a luxury you can barely afford. Every time you let your guard down, every moment you're not actively maintaining control over your domain, you can feel them probing at the edges of your consciousness. They're looking for weaknesses, mapping your defenses, preparing for another assault that could come at any time from any direction. The isolation that once felt like freedom now feels like imprisonment again. Sure, you rule over an entire dimension, but what's the point of being a king if your kingdom is constantly under siege? The creatures here follow your commands, but they're not exactly stimulating company. The vines respond to your will, but they don't offer much in the way of conversation. You're surrounded by extensions of your own power, which means you're essentially talking to yourself all the time. Memories of your human life start feeling more precious than they used to. Those moments of connection with the black widow spiders, the satisfaction of moving that grandfather clock with your mind, even the twisted pleasure of tormenting your family, they all seem more meaningful now than they did when you were living them. Back then, you took those experiences for granted. Now, they're all you have left of who you used to be.
The changes to your body continue in directions you didn't anticipate. Your left hand grows larger and more claw-like, but it also becomes more sensitive, picking up vibrations and textures that your old human hands never could have detected. Your face warps further away from anything recognizably human, but your vision sharpens to the point where you can see across dimensions without conscious effort. These transformations should feel like upgrades, like evolution beyond human limitations. Instead, they feel like symptoms of an infection that's slowly consuming whatever's left of Henry Creel. Each change takes you further from your origins, makes it harder to remember what it felt like to be that angry 12-year-old boy who just wanted someone to understand him. The irony isn't lost on you that in becoming powerful enough to reshape reality, you've also become something that reality itself seems to reject. The normal world treats you like a virus, constantly working to contain and eliminate your influence.
The Upside Down accepts you, but only because you've bent it to your will through force. You don't belong anywhere, not really. And belonging was always what you wanted most. Your grand plan for remaking the world starts feeling less like destiny and more like the tantrum of a child who never learned better coping mechanisms. All that rhetoric about eliminating the weak and revealing people's true natures,
What if it was just elaborate justification for hurting others because you'd been hurt first? What if the whole philosophy of predator versus prey was nothing more than a scared kid's attempt to make sense of a world that never made room for him? These moments of self-doubt come more frequently now, usually in the quiet hours when your enemies aren't actively trying to kill you and you have nothing to distract yourself from your own thoughts. They're dangerous thoughts, the kind that could undermine everything you've worked toward. But they're also impossible to ignore completely. The worst part is realizing that even if you succeed, even if you manage to corrupt or destroy everything in the normal world, you'll still be exactly what you've always been: alone, angry, and fundamentally disconnected from anything that might give your existence meaning. Victory won't change that.
Revenge won't fix that. Power certainly won't cure that. But stopping now isn't really an option either. You've come too far, hurt too many people, burned too many bridges to simply call it quits and hope for redemption. The path forward leads through more violence, more corruption, more transformation into something increasingly monstrous. The path backward leads nowhere at all, because the person you used to be is as dead as everyone you've killed. So you hover in your throne room of vines and shadows, master of a realm that feels more like a prison every day, planning your next move in a game where victory might be indistinguishable from defeat. The boy who wanted desperately to belong somewhere has become the monster that belongs nowhere. And there's a terrible poetry in that transformation that you're only just beginning to understand.
The weight of your choices settles around you like a burial shroud. And for the first time in decades, you start to question whether being right was worth being alone. Every decision that led you here made perfect sense at the time. Defending yourself against a family that wanted to fix you, escaping from a laboratory that treated you like a specimen, punishing a world that never tried to understand you. But now, suspended in this web of your own making, you can't shake the feeling that maybe, just maybe, you chose the wrong path at every single turn. The vines that hold you aloft pulse with a rhythm that matches your heartbeat, if you even have a heartbeat anymore. It's hard to tell where your body ends and this dimension begins. You've become so integrated with the Upside Down that losing it would probably kill you, but keeping it might be killing you anyway, just more slowly. Every breath tastes like ash and regret. Every thought echoes through corridors of twisted flesh and bone.
You find yourself thinking about Alice more often now. Your sister, who never did anything worse than love you unconditionally. She used to draw pictures of butterflies and rainbows, innocent little sketches that she'd proudly show to anyone who'd look. You killed her for that innocence, crushed it out of her because it reminded you of everything you thought you could never have. Now, surrounded but nothing but darkness and decay, those butterfly drawings seem like the most beautiful things that ever existed. The memories come in waves that you can't control or predict. One minute you're plotting your next assault on Hawkins, and the next you're 12 years old again, watching your father try to teach you how to throw a baseball in the backyard. He was patient with you even when you showed no interest. Even when you deliberately threw the ball into the neighbor's yard just to end the lesson early. He kept trying because he thought that's what fathers were supposed to do, and you hated him for it instead of appreciating it.
Your mother's voice drifts through your consciousness like smoke from a dying fire. She used to sing lullabies when she thought no one was listening, old songs from her childhood that probably reminded her of better times. You used those memories against her, twisted them into nightmares, turned her own love into a weapon. Now you'd give anything to hear her sing again, just once, without the overlay of terror you painted across every note. The creatures in your domain sense your emotional turbulence and respond accordingly, their movements becoming more agitated, more confused. They're extensions of your will, but they're also mirrors of your mental state, and right now, your mental state is about as stable as a house built on quicksand. Some of them start attacking each other without your command, acting out the self-destructive impulses that you're trying so hard to suppress. You reach out through the connection you share with them, trying to restore order, but the effort feels exhausting in a way it never did before.
Maintaining control over an entire dimension requires constant vigilance, constant energy, constant attention to detail. There's no vacation time when you're an interdimensional tyrant, no sick days when you're the supreme overlord of a realm built on hatred and fear. The government forces arrayed against you represent a different kind of threat than you faced before. These aren't frightened teenagers stumbling around in the dark. These are trained professionals with advanced equipment and decades of research backing them up. They've learned from every previous encounter, adopted their tactics, developed new weapons specifically designed to hurt things like you. Their latest assault comes not through direct confrontation, but through psychological warfare that hits closer to home than you care to admit. They broadcast recordings of your father's voice throughout Hawkins, playing his testimony from the asylum over and over again. Not the parts where he sounds crazy, but the parts where he talks about loving his son, about wishing he could have helped you, about blaming himself for your transformation.
The strategy is cruel and effective. They're not trying to hurt your body, they're trying to hurt your soul, assuming you still have one. Every word of regret from Victor's lips is a knife twisted in whatever passes for your conscience these days. He never understood what you were going through, never knew how to help, but he tried in his own fumbling way, and you repaid that effort by destroying everything he cared about. Eleven's friends have grown more sophisticated in their approach as well. Instead of just trying to fight you directly, they're working to evacuate people from your area of influence, creating safe zones where your corruption can't reach, building networks of support that make potential victims harder to isolate and manipulate. They're turning your own tactics against you, using community and connection as weapons in ways you never anticipated. The most infuriating part is watching them succeed where you always failed. They're creating the kind of belonging, the kind of understanding, the kind of acceptance that you spent your entire human life desperately craving. They've built something beautiful out of shared trauma, while you've built something monstrous out of yours.
The contrast is so stark, it's almost painful to observe. Max Mayfield's recovery becomes a symbol that rallies resistance throughout the region. Her refusal to stay dead, her determination to fight back, even from a hospital bed, her ability to inspire others despite her own struggles. It's everything you never managed to be when you were struggling with your own demons. She found a way to transform pain into strength, while you transformed pain into vengeance. The ripple effects of her survival extend far beyond what you initially realized. Other survivors of supernatural encounters start coming forward, sharing their stories, comparing notes, building a database of information about creatures like you. What used to be isolated incidents that could be covered up or dismissed are now part of a recognized pattern that demands systematic response. Your window of opportunity for easy victories is closing rapidly. Every day that passes brings new reinforcements to your enemies, new strategies, new technologies designed to counter your abilities.
The element of surprise that served you so well in your initial attacks is gone, replaced by prepared defenses and coordinated resistance that makes every move a calculated risk. The loneliness hits hardest during the quiet moments between battles. You rule over countless creatures, command vast powers, reshape reality according to your whims, but you have no one to share any of it with, no one to celebrate victories with, no one to commiserate with over defeats, no one to simply exist beside without agenda, or manipulation, or fear. You start to understand why 11 rejected your offer of partnership all those years ago. It wasn't because she couldn't see the logic in your plans or appreciate the scope of your vision. It was because she recognized that following you meant becoming like you, isolated, bitter, consumed by anger that grows stronger with every feeding but never actually satisfies the hunger underneath. The children from Brenner's program represent everything you could have been if you'd made different choices. They suffered similar traumas, endured similar experiments, faced similar challenges, but they found ways to heal instead of ways to hurt. They built connections instead of burning bridges, sought understanding instead of seeking revenge, chose hope instead of choosing hatred. 2 in particular becomes a mirror that reflects all your worst decisions back at you. She has powers similar to yours, memories of the same laboratory, scars from the same kinds of abuse, but she uses her abilities to protect people instead of punishing them. When she looks at you, you can see the disappointment in her eyes, not fear or hatred, but genuine sadness for what you've become. So there you have it, the complete nightmare of being born as Henry Creel, the boy who became Vecna. From that first breath in 1947 to ruling over a dimension of pure horror, every step of your journey was paved with rejection, misunderstanding, and the kind of pain that transforms innocent children into interdimensional monsters. You wanted nothing more than to belong somewhere, to be accepted for who you were, but the world kept trying to fix what it saw as broken. In the end, you got exactly what everyone feared you'd become, not because you were born evil, but because nobody bothered to show you a better way to be human. #Vecna, #Stranger Things, #Villain Life, #Upside Down.